Hi, my name is Mark Omdig. This is my 10-minute sample teaching video. American history, high school, 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. Our topic, the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. Our students, our virtual students, who are silent today, oddly silent today, have handed in a paper on this narrative. They had some spin-up before about what was happening in England regarding slavery, and we'll have some spin-up for the Civil War at the end of our lesson today. This is the 10-minute preface to our actual lesson. So, the narrative, a phenomenal book in its time, a phenomenal document. What's happening in England at this time? 1830s, 1833. Who looked it up? Thank you, student. Slavery Abolition Act, correct. All my students are very smart. 1833. In England we have the Slavery Abolition Act. What did they spend? How much money? Does anyone remember? Who was supposed to look that up? How much money did they raise? 20 million pounds. 20 million, which was at the time gargantuan. 20 was 6 zeros after. Pounds sterling. A gargantuan was. What was that money for? What was it for? The celebration that slavery was over? Was that what it was? No. What was it for? Reparations. Correct. Reparations for the slave owners. The government of Great Britain was trying to avoid conflict. Slave owners were very wealthy, typically. So a slave owner might be someone in power. We're going to reimburse them for their slaves over a so many year period. Who looked up how much this was worth in modern times? 2013, what was it worth? 16.5 billion pounds. 16.5 billion pounds. A gargantuan amount, which I'm told wasn't repaid until 2015. All right, here comes Frederick Douglass. In 1840, he publishes his narrative. Now, no mistake, this is an anti-slavery book to highlight the horrific reality of slavery. There's no whitewashing. And this is a first-person account. It's a first-person account, a very valuable account. Brilliant speaker, exceptional writer. Frederick Douglass could capture the imagination. He could make people laugh while he was telling them scary things. His detractors, in fact, said that he wasn't even a slave. He wasn't even black. Somehow he was an imposter. He wrote this he orated this great phrase, "I appear this evening as a thief and a robber. I stole this head, these limbs, this body," and ran off with it. How can he steal his own head? People got it. People got it. They laughed. Those of you who read the book, I assume we all read the book. You're supposed to pick 3 things you learned, and that what you thought was the most fearful part of the book. I'm assuming, now you could pick up to 3 times, 3 things, 3 accounts that you thought were terrible, terrible. Now I'm assuming we all picked the murder of Denby as one of the terrible things, right? In cold blood, the slave manager, not even the slave owner, murders Denby. What happens with Denby? He is standing in the water, right? He's standing in the water. I won't read it. Now, people were horrified by this, and justly so. This is an anti-slavery book. What did we decide was the biggest problem for slave owners by this point? What was the biggest problem? Right. When did the Civil War start? 1861. All my students knew this by heart. They're brilliant. probably because of their teacher. 1861. So we have this document, this narrative, comes out in 1840, for a whole generation before the war. A whole generation. The horror of this, the reality of the evil, flat out evil of slavery. So what was the problem again? What was the challenge for slave owners? They had to justify. They had to justify it. Justify some way to say it was okay. Now, there was something more horrifying and more offensive to the reading audience of this narrative. More offensive than the murder. Can you imagine what it was? This is the line. My father was a white man. He was admitted to be such by all I ever heard speak of my parentage. The opinion was also whispered that my master was my father. One of the big arguments, opinions, stances used by the slave owner was that the white person was better, that they weren't really a person at all, that we were above them, we were better, they were animals. But realities like this one, that his owner was his father, are gravely offensive to the Christian world, and also very hard to hold the stance that I'm somehow better than the slave. This was a big problem throughout. Now, slavery was known to be an inherent evil from the very beginning. From the very beginning. John J. Chapman describes slavery as the sleeping serpent that lay coiled under the table at the Constitutional Convention of 1787. Brilliant phrase. Sleeping serpent. The serpent. Satan, right? Now, when you read these terrible, terrible things, there were other things, other parts in this book that I found challenging to stark. What did Frederick Douglass sleep on at night? Right. He didn't have a bed. He didn't have a mattress. He didn't have a mat. He had nothing. He slept in the dirt. And what did he use for night clothes? His regular clothes? He didn't have clothes. When he was a tiny boy, he had nothing. And then when he got a little older, he was given a rough burlap, shall we call it burlap, shirt. No pants, no socks, no shoes. So he slept on the dirt ground. And he said that several times he thought he'd freeze to death. He'd freeze to death. But for the fact that he found this rough sack, and he slept with his upper part of his body in the sack, remember? And the warmth of his own breath, his upper body in the sack, saved his life, saved his life. They denied the slaves the most basic human needs. Not luxuries, basic human needs. Food, sleep, clothes, and on it goes. This was and continues to be a very powerful anti-slavery document. It's a first-hand document, making it all the more valuable and real. Now, we're going to discuss, this is the spin-up to the Civil War. I want you to remember that in our next discussion, we're going to talk about ways, as we continue our lesson today, we're going to talk about ways that we could have avoided the Civil War, and how dangerous, how violent, and how destructive the Civil War was. Just one example, the estimates are that 620,000 people died in the Civil War. The population of all of New York City, which was the megapolis of the time, was 320,000. So again, our question as we continue lessons, how might we have avoided the Civil War? Before we discuss it, Thank you very much. We'll continue tomorrow.